Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. Now, want to keep it on football here as we start in our number one. We talked a little bit about the LSU secondary, and that's a position that's got a ton of question marks. We know that. That's what I spent just 15 minutes telling you about. A position where I don't think there are really any question marks in terms of ability and depth, maybe in terms of how much each player will be used, is tight end. And I've spoken about tight end probably more in this spring than any other position on the field. I haven't talked a lot about quarterbacks. I've spent some time talking about running back, and we'll do that a little bit later as well. Spent a lot of time at wide receiver, not a ton at linebacker, and we know what the issue is at defensive line, and we'll talk about that later as well. But tight end, I think, is going to be a huge piece to what LSU does this year. There are a lot of reasons for that. One, because they have good tight ends. That's a good place to start. Two, it's because they have unproven wide receivers who I need to learn more about, and I think Garrett Nussmeier probably needs to learn about. Three, it's because Brian Kelly has always used the tight end very well. And when you put those three things together, it's like, well, this makes a ton of sense. I can remember counting down to signing day 2023, and Shea Dixon from On 3 was talking about the potential flip of KaMorrean Pimpton from Vanderbilt to LSU. It's not a flip we see all the time, Vanderbilt to LSU, sometimes in baseball, but not necessarily in football. But Shea was really high on KaMorrean Pimpton because of his size, the measurables, and his leaping ability. And I do also remember going out there in fall camp, and there was a red zone period, and there was a fade route, and KaMorrean Pimpton skied and made a catch up where I don't think any DB on LSU's roster is physically capable of getting to. Because he's that tall, he's got that long of arms, and he jumps that well. But we didn't see him really at all in the regular season. I haven't written him off, and I don't think Brian Kelly has either.
I think we've always felt like he was going to be, a dynamic presence as a pass catcher. I think it was, feeling more comfortable within, the structure of the offense and understanding what to do and how to do it. And then becoming more physical as an inline presence as a blocker. I think he's established that this spring. Will he unseat Mason? No. But can he complement him? Yes. And if ever that we needed him to go in there as the singular tight end, he can do the jobs.
And that explains it. Like, he just wasn't ready to get on there and block. And if he couldn't do that, and you were going to line him up just to catch passes, well, then you become predictable by personnel. Everyone knows when he's in the game, you're going to throw the football. Plus, you've got a couple guys in front of him that can do both. So not a lot of playing time for KaMorrean Pimpton, but you put some weight on, you work on your technique, you get a year older, you get a year stronger, and then I think it's realistic that KaMorrean Pimpton could be a factor on this year's team. Now, Mac Markway, the other tight end in that freshman class last year, did get on the field, and I think that's because he is more capable of putting a hand in the dirt and dealing with SEC defensive linemen. I'm not saying he dominates them, but he was more prepared when he got here than KaMorrean Pimpton to do that. Now, Markway missed his senior year of high school, but is a big physical presence. He doesn't run as well as Pimpton. He doesn't jump as well as Pimpton. Doesn't quite have the catch radius. He's more of a guy that blocks very well and can get you a catch, not necessarily a playmaker at the tight end spot this time in his career, but Brian Kelly spoke to his development.
What we see from Mac is a guy that has improved in the pass catching and route running. And I think more than anything else, awareness in the passing game. I thought that there was a lack of awareness at times in the passing game. Now crossing routes and dig routes and things of that nature, there's a much better awareness. And he continues to get better in the run game.
So that's a guy that they brought in to help block. Mason Taylor, when he got to LSU, was not necessarily equipped to do both. He was a pretty good athlete who had good enough size and was able to go out there and catch some passes for you. And he did that starting in the Florida State game in the Superdome. But you didn't have any other options to put. I mean, you put Jack Mashburn out there to run into somebody, but that's a converted quarterback you got doing that. But Mason Taylor has grown up, and he has evolved his game to now being a complete package at the tight end spot. And that's kind of a microcosm of the entire room at tight end since Mason Taylor got here. Because when he got here, there was nobody else. You had no versatility, no diversity in skill sets, just no depth, just that guy. Well, now that you've looked at this over the course of 3 years, you've got versatility. Mason Taylor can kind of do both. Mac Markway is a physical blocker who is working on the passing game. KaMorrean Pimpton is a weapon in the passing game who's working on blocking. And then you'll bring in Taylor Green in the back end of this, who's just a freak. So you've gone from having no versatility whatsoever to a lot of it at this point, but it all is going to start, as Brian Kelly just alluded to, with Mason Taylor, who we talked about earlier today.
He's a player that we're going to count on much more than we did last year. I mean, he's going to be a central figure in what we do, and Garrett looks to him as well. And so I think that in this offense, the tight end will be featured quite regularly.
And that is one of those quotes that I look at and say, he's not blowing smoke there. That's not some sort of half answer or white lie, or that is, I believe, an earnest and sincere thought that he has about this offense. Last year, you don't really need to throw it to the tight end that much. You've got 2 first-round wide receivers running around out there. You've got a quarterback who's completely dynamic and very capable of stretching the ball down the field, who doesn't necessarily need a safety blanket all the time. He's capable of making a lot of plays down the field and making the difficult throws. But if you've got now, instead of a quarterback in his 4th year starting in college, and now you've got a quarterback in his 1st year starting who doesn't run around like a crazy person and doesn't at this point have 2 first-round wide receivers, there is very little that's more comforting than a quality tight end. I mean, last year, just for the numbers, Malik Neighbors had 89 catches. Brian Thomas had 68 catches. Mason Taylor had 36. Like, those 2 guys combined to catch 210 yards worth of footballs every single Saturday. Mason Taylor averaged 29. It wasn't like he was a non-factor. This is not a Les Miles tight end situation. But this is a situation where there were 2 guys taking the lion's share of the receptions. I mean, they had 2,700 yards worth of receptions between the 2 of them. Mason Taylor had 348. Like, it just wasn't a focal point. But to go back to the beginning of this segment, like, at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly's teams made the tight end a focal point. And he didn't have Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks at Notre Dame. He had Mackey Award winning tight ends. He had first rounders at tight end. He had third rounders at tight end. And I don't know where Mason Taylor falls into the draft picture at this point. He's not 6'7", doesn't have a huge catch radius, not, the most physical guy at the line of scrimmage. But at this level, Mason Taylor's the complete package at tight end. And I would expect, instead of 36 catches, for him to have closer to 50 catches this year. I would expect him, instead of having 1 touchdown this coming year, keep in mind, Thomas and Neighbors combined for 31. Instead of him having 1, I would suggest he'd have 6, 7, 8. Like, I really think he could be that involved in what they do. Now, if they were bringing Neighbors and Thomas back, I don't think I would say that. And if I knew who was next up at wide receiver, although we feel pretty good, it's KaMorrean Lacey and Chris Hilton, and then probably the 2 transfers right now. But what are those guys? KaMorrean Lacey last year was less involved in LSU's offense than Mason Taylor. Now, he had 7 touchdowns, which was 6 more than Mason Taylor, but he only had 30 catches on the year, 558 yards. I'm excited about what LSU is going to be able to do with the tight ends this year. I think that is going to have to make defensive coordinators think. I think it's going to occupy safeties and linebackers, and I think it's going to be to LSU's advantage. There's obviously a real spot there for Mac Markway to help and contribute, but you know what you got in Taylor, and I'm just excited by Pimpton and Taylor Green because of their athleticism and how big a mismatch those 2 guys can be on whoever it is that you put on them in the game. I will keep going back to that catch that I saw KaMorrean Pimpton make in practice back last August, and I'm going, that's really difficult for a defense to handle. But we've talked about this a lot. Brian Kelly likes playing older players he can depend on. Young guys got to earn their stripes. It sounds like Markway and Pimpton have made some strides this week, and I think we'll see them coming up in the spring game on Saturday inside Tiger Stadium. We're not done hearing from Brian Kelly. I want to talk about some freshmen in the defensive backfield. I want to talk about the transfer portal. We'll do some of that at the back end of hour number one. Before we get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.